The sun is setting over the ancient African plains. Golden light pours across the savanna, and a warm wind whispers through tall grasses. In the distance, you hear the soft calls of birds returning to their nests and the low rumble of elephants passing through dry riverbeds. The air is heavy with dust and the faint smell of wildfires. Beneath an acacia tree, a small group of early humans huddle together. Their day has been long, foraging, scavenging, watching the skies for vultures that reveal hidden carcasses, and keeping a constant eye on predators. Now, as night approaches, they gather for safety and warmth. Among them is a figure whose mind works just a little differently, more curious, more observant, more daring. Tonight, that mind will shape a tool unlike any made before. This is the world of Homo habilis, the so-called handyman, and their story marks one of the greatest leaps in our evolutionary journey, the emergence of Homo habilis around 2.4 million years ago. The fossil record shows the appearance of a species that represented a profound shift in the story of life. Homo habilis. Smaller than us, but larger-brained than their Australopithecine ancestors. Homo habilis averaged about 4 feet tall, with long arms, short legs, and a slightly more human-like face. Their cranial capacity, roughly 510 to 600 cubic centimeters, was a significant increase from earlier species, hinting at enhanced problem-solving abilities and complex thought. But what truly sets Homo habilis apart is not their size or shape. It's what they did. They weren't just surviving, they were innovating. These were the first hominins strongly linked with systematic tool-making. Unlike their Australopithecine predecessors, who may have stumbled upon useful stones by chance, Homo habilis deliberately selected, shaped, and refined tools for specific purposes. They were no longer passive participants in their environment. They were beginning to master it, the refinement of the Oldowan tools. The tools used by Homo habilis belong to what archaeologists call the Oldowan industry, but by this period, their craftsmanship was improving. Imagine sitting among these early humans and watching the process unfold. Selection of raw material. They didn't pick up just any stone. They chose ones with fine-grained textures, like basalt, chert, or quartz, which fractured predictably. Controlled knapping. With practiced strikes, they chipped flakes away from a core stone, creating edges sharp enough to slice through. Flesh, hide, and tendons. Multi-tool strategies. Unlike earlier random flake use, Homo habilis began distinguishing between hammerstones for pounding, flakes for cutting, and cores for scraping. These tools, though primitive by modern standards, were revolutionary. A single sharp flake meant access to high-calorie meat, otherwise locked away behind thick animal hides or within marrow-rich bones. With every cut, these early humans grew more independent from the cycles of nature. No longer limited to what they could chew raw, they could now process, prepare, and consume food in entirely new ways. The meat that grew our minds. The importance of this technological leap cannot be overstated. Around this time, researchers believe that early hominins began consuming significantly more animal protein than their ancestors. By scavenging carcasses and extracting marrow, Homo habilis gained access to dense, energy-rich nutrients that plants alone couldn't provide. These calories fed their growing brains, fueling cognitive development and setting humanity on a course toward greater intelligence. But meat didn't just change the body. It transformed society. Group foraging, working together to find carcasses or drive predators away, became more effective than going alone. Food sharing. High-value resources like marrow and organ meat were too precious to waste. Sharing likely became a social norm, fostering cooperation and trust. Role specialization. Some individuals excelled at tool-making, others at scouting, and others at defending. Simple but profound, this laid the foundation for structured communities. Through tools and meat, Homo habilis became more than survivalists. They became strategists, the first sparks of teaching and learning. Picture a small group gathered under a tree, a juvenile watching intently as an elder strikes a hammerstone against a core. With each blow, flakes fall to the ground. The elder pauses, demonstrates and guides the young one's hand. This moment, unremarkable to them, monumental to us, represents one of the earliest forms of knowledge transfer. Unlike instinct-driven, animals, Homo habilis, relied increasingly on cultural learning. Toolmaking was not purely genetic, it had to be taught. This means communication, gestures, expressions, vocal sounds became more complex and purposeful. Archaeologists believe this is where the roots of language may have begun to grow. While true spoken language would not emerge for hundreds of thousands of years, Homo habilis likely possessed a more sophisticated range of vocalizations and signals than their ancestors. Teaching, sharing, and cooperation weren't just survival strategies. They were laying the groundwork for human culture. Facing the giants, predators and peril, life on the Pliocene and early Pleistocene plains remained brutally dangerous. Homo habilis faced predators unlike anything we know today. Saber-toothed cats, Meganterion and Dinophilus, lurked in the shadows, ambushing prey with terrifying precision. Gigantic hyenas, stronger and larger than modern ones, roamed in packs, capable of crushing bones with their immense jaws. Crocodiles, some exceeding 20 feet in length, patrolled riverbanks where Homo habilis gathered water. Without speed, strength, or size on their side, early humans turned increasingly to tools, teamwork, and strategy. Scavenging became a calculated risk. Groups would wait for predators to abandon their kills, then rush in, tools in hand, to strip what remained. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they didn't. The cost of failure was often fatal. This constant dance between predator and prey shaped early human psychology. Fear, caution, planning, and collective defense became hardwired traits, setting us apart from other primates. Climate instability and innovationists. If predators weren't enough, Homo habilis also endured a volatile climate. Around 2.5 to 2 million years ago, Earth's climate began swinging between warmer and cooler phases, a prelude to the Pleistocene ice ages. Rainfall patterns shifted, lakes dried, forests thinned, and grasslands expanded. Each change disrupted ecosystems, forcing Homo habilis to adapt repeatedly, expanding ranges. With food sources fluctuating, groups traveled farther than ever before. Resource flexibility. They learned to exploit a wider variety of plants, tubers, seeds, and small animals. Tool dependence. As environments grew less predictable, tools became indispensable survival aids. Those who innovated thrived. Those who didn't vanished. Evolution favored curiosity, adaptability, and creativity, qualities that would define humanity's future. Social bonds and the birth of empathy. Survival wasn't just about tools and food, it was also about each other. Fossil evidence suggests that even at this early stage, hominins began caring for the injured and elderly within their groups. Healing broken bones, sharing scarce food, and protecting weaker members indicate something remarkable: empathy. This emotional depth likely evolved alongside cognitive complexity. Communities that nurtured social bonds gained stability, safety, and shared knowledge. Slowly, the foundations of human society were being laid. Around the flickering light of primitive fires, though true fire mastery would come later, groups probably exchanged gestures, vocalizations, and stories. The sense of belonging, of us versus them, may have first taken root here. Echoes of the future. By the close of Homo habilis' reign around 1.8 million years ago, something extraordinary was happening. A new species was emerging, Homo erectus. Taller, stronger, and with an even larger brain, Homo erectus would carry the torch forward, pushing tool-making into new frontiers and expanding beyond Africa for the first time. But none of that would have been possible without the innovations of Homo habilis. This was the species that learned to shape the world around them, laid the foundations of cooperation and teaching, began to shift from instinct-driven survival to intentional problem-solving. In their chipped stones lie the first whispers of humanity's destiny. Closing the second chapter, as we leave this chapter, picture once more a small group of Homo habilis. Beneath the African sun, a child watches closely as an elder demonstrates the careful art of shaping stone. Each strike carries meaning, a lesson passed down, a fragment of knowledge preserved. Around them, life is precarious and uncertain, yet within their hands lies a power no other creature possesses, the ability to imagine, to create, to change the course of survival itself. This is where humanity began to rise, not through strength or speed, but through ingenuity. In the next chapter, we'll explore the era of Homo erectus, the true pioneers of exploration, the masters of fire, and the first to step beyond Africa's cradle. For now, listen to the wind whispering across the savannah, carrying with it the echoes of chipped stones, of lessons learned, of futures yet to come. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing on a grassy plain where the cool breath of an early morning breeze brushes gently across your skin. The faint rustle of tall savanna grass whispers like a secret, and far in the distance, you hear the low, distant call of a wild animal. There are no cities here, no roads, no farms, no names, only the raw earth, endless skies and life, wild, fragile, and untamed. This is our planet 2.8 million years ago, a time when the first sparks of what would one day become humanity were beginning to glow. Tonight, we're going on a journey, not just through history, but through deep time. We'll step into a world where early humans stood on the edge of survival, facing predators far stronger than themselves, changing climates and landscapes that demanded adaptation. It was during this period that something extraordinary happened. The first tools were shaped, and with them, the future of our species was set into motion. This is the story of how tools first shaped the world, and ultimately, us. The world. 2.8 million years ago. To understand life at this time, we must first picture the Earth itself. The late Pliocene epoch was an era of transition, a crossroads between older ecosystems and the modern world we know today. Vast stretches of African savannas replaced dense tropical forests. Temperatures fluctuated, rainfall patterns shifted, and ancient river systems carved new paths across the land. The cooling climate forced many species to adapt or vanish. But amid these changes, one corner of East Africa stood at the center of a silent revolution, the Great Rift Valley. It was here, surrounded by rolling plains and volcanic highlands, that some of the earliest ancestors of humans began experimenting with something no other creature had fully mastered: technology. These beings weren't quite human yet. They belonged to a species known as Australopithecus afarensis, small-bodied primates who walked upright, lived in groups, and survived by foraging for fruits, roots, and occasionally scavenging meat. Among them, a remarkable evolutionary shift was beginning. Their brains were growing, slowly but surely. Their hands were becoming more dexterous. And perhaps most importantly, their curiosity was awakening, the birth of tool-making. Imagine an Australopithecine sitting beneath the shade of an acacia tree. Nearby lies the carcass of a large antelope left behind by a saber-toothed cat. The smell of decay fills the air, but to this hominin, it's an opportunity. If only there were a way to reach the rich marrow hidden deep inside the bones. And then, a moment of inspiration. A rough stone is picked up, it's sharp on one edge. With a single clumsy strike, the hominin chips away a fragment, revealing a jagged surface. Another strike, and another, until finally a primitive stone flake emerges, a cutting edge sharper than any claw or tooth. This small, seemingly simple act marks a turning point in history. Archaeologists call these early tools the Oldowan industry, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where some of the oldest examples were discovered. Dating back about 2.6 to 2.8 million years, these tools represent humanity's first known leap into technology. They weren't complex, just broken stones shaped into sharp flakes and used alongside unmodified cobbles as hammerstones. But their impact was enormous. With these tools, early hominins could scrape meat from bones, cut through tough hides, and crack open marrow-rich bones that even predators couldn't exploit. Suddenly, a world of new possibilities opened up. Tools didn't just make survival easier. They changed the rules of survival entirely. Why this moment mattered. To us today, a chipped rock might seem trivial. But for our ancestors, it was revolutionary. This was the first time a creature on Earth had deliberately reshaped the environment to meet its needs, rather than passively adapting to it. Before this, life evolved slowly, dictated by natural selection. But with tools, evolution gained a new ally: culture. Using tools created a ripple effect. Dietary changes. Access to meat and marrow provided concentrated energy, fueling the growth of larger brains in later generations. Social structures. Tool use likely encouraged cooperation, sharing food, teaching techniques, and protecting each other from predators. Cognitive leaps. Creating a tool required planning, memory, and foresight, mental capacities that would eventually set us apart from every other species. It's humbling to realize that this tiny step, striking one stone against another, was the seed from which all human innovation would grow. From this moment, the trajectory of our species began to diverge from that of our closest primate relatives. Who made the first tools? For decades, scientists believed that Homo habilis, whose name literally means handyman, was the first toolmaker. Discovered in Tanzania in the 1960s, Homo habilis fossils were dated to around 2.4 million years ago, and the association with Oldowan tools seemed clear. But in 2015, researchers working at Lomekwi 3 in Kenya unearthed stone tools dating back 3.3 million years, nearly a million years older than Homo habilis. These tools suggested that Australopithecus, or another early hominin, might have beaten Homo habilis to the punch. Even more intriguing was a fossil jawbone discovered in Ledi Jararu, Ethiopia, dated to 2.8 million years ago. It's considered the earliest known fossil of the genus Homo. Could this transitional species have been the first real innovator? The truth is, we may never know exactly who struck the first blow. But one thing is certain. By 2.8 million years ago, toolmaking had become a critical survival strategy: predators, prey, and survival. Let's pause for a moment and step into the daily life of these early toolmakers. Imagine walking across a wide plain under the blazing midday sun. There is no shelter here, no fences, no safe villages. You are surrounded by creatures that see you not as a fellow being, but as food. Lions, twice the size of modern ones, prowl the grasslands. Packs of hyenas, faster, fiercer, and far more numerous than today, roam in search of easy kills. Gigantic saber-toothed cats lie in wait, their curved fangs ready to pierce thick hides. For small-bodied hominins standing barely 4 feet tall, survival demanded ingenuity. Tools weren't just for food. They were weapons of defense and intimidation. A sharp stone could slice open flesh or crack a predator's skull. A heavy hammerstone could be hurled to drive attackers away. Still, danger was constant. Even with tools, early humans were scavengers more than hunters, often waiting for larger predators to finish their meals before daring to approach a carcass. Every foray carried risks. the possibility of becoming prey rather than predator. This constant tension between danger and opportunity shaped not just bodies, but minds. Over time, these pressures forged creatures that could plan ahead, cooperate, and innovate. The great climate shift. While survival on the savannah was perilous, another force quietly shaped human evolution: climate change. Around 2.8 million years ago, the Earth entered a period of increasing dryness and cooling. Dense forests gave way to open grasslands. Rainfall became less predictable, forcing hominins to range farther in search of food and water. This shift wasn't just environmental, it was evolutionary pressure. Adapting to open landscapes meant walking longer distances, spotting predators from afar, and exploiting resources more creatively. Tools played a key role here. With them, our ancestors could extract calories from carcasses without hunting large game themselves, process plant materials in new ways, broadening their diet, modify their surroundings for shelter and safety. In short, tools became an extension of their bodies, a way to survive in an increasingly hostile world. Setting the stage for the future. By the end of this period, the first faint outlines of humanity had begun to emerge. The earliest members of the genus Homo were evolving larger brains, smaller teeth, and more versatile hands. Communities were forming, communication was improving, and knowledge, how to make tools, where to find food, how to avoid predators, began to pass from one generation to the next. It's here that we see the first hints of culture, not just individual survival, but collective memory. And yet, these early humans had no idea what they were setting in motion. They could not have imagined that, millions of years later, their descendants would use tools to split the atom, reach the moon, and build civilizations of steel and glass. But every skyscraper, every smartphone, every spacecraft, all of it, traces back to a chipped stone held in trembling hands beneath an ancient African sun. Closing the first chapter, as the Pliocene epoch edged toward its end, the seeds of human ingenuity had been sown. The stage was set for something even more extraordinary, a period where tools would evolve, brains would expand, and survival strategies would grow more complex. In the next chapter of our journey, we'll dive deeper into this transition, how the first Homo species emerged, how they refined their tools, and how these innovations forever altered the course of evolution. For now, imagine standing in that ancient landscape once more. The wind sweeps across the savannah. A small figure kneels by a stone, striking it carefully, deliberately. With each chip, sparks fly, not of fire, but of something greater, the spark of humanity. The night is quiet, save for the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant cry of an unseen animal. A small group huddles close together on the edge of a clearing. Shadows flicker against the trunks of nearby trees, cast by a strange, glowing light. Sparks rise into the cool air and vanish into the darkness. The group stares into the dancing flames, mesmerized. This is one of the most profound moments in human history, the taming of fire. And at the center of this story stands a remarkable species, Homo erectus. With longer strides, bigger brains, and bolder ambitions than any hominin before them, Homo erectus didn't just survive. They conquered. They became the first true explorers, leaving Africa behind and spreading across continents, setting humanity on a path toward global dominance. The rise of Homo erectus, around 1.9 million years ago, fossils show the appearance of Homo erectus, a species that represented a dramatic leap forward in our evolutionary story. Compared to their predecessors, they were taller, leaner, and stronger, with long legs built for endurance and efficient walking over vast distances. Their cranial capacity, averaging between 800 and 100 cubic centimeters, dwarfed that of Homo habilis, signaling enhanced problem-solving skills, planning, and social complexity. For the first time, our ancestors began to resemble modern humans in both body and behavior. But what truly set Homo erectus apart wasn't just their anatomy, it was their ambition. Unlike earlier hominins who remained tied to small ecological niches, Homo erectus ventured far beyond Africa, becoming the first species of our lineage to migrate across the globe. Out of Africa, humanity's first migration. For millions of years, the African continent had been the cradle of human evolution. But around 1.8 million years ago, Homo erectus began to push beyond familiar lands. Why leave? Climate played a key role. Shifting weather patterns and drying grasslands forced Homo erectus to explore new territories in search of food and water. But it wasn't just necessity driving them. Their improved tools, endurance, and adaptability gave them the confidence to expand. Archaeological evidence reveals their astonishing spread. Dmanisi, Georgia. Fossils dated to 1.8 million years. Show that Homo erectus reached the edge of Europe astonishingly early. Java, Indonesia. In Southeast Asia, Homo erectus thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, earning the nickname Java Man. China. Fossils from Zhoukoudian near Beijing date to 700,000 years ago, showing thriving communities adapting to colder northern climates. This wasn't just migration. It was the first great expansion of humanity. For the first time in evolutionary history, our ancestors became a truly cosmopolitan species, capable of surviving in environments as varied as tropical jungles, grassy savannas, and temperate forests. New age of tools. Homo erectus carried with them a new technological leap, the Acheulean industry. Whereas earlier Oldowan tools were simple flakes and choppers, Acheulean tools were refined, symmetrical, and purposeful. The signature artifact of this period was the hand axe, a teardrop-shaped tool carefully chipped on both sides to create razor-sharp edges. Unlike Oldowan flakes, which were often improvised, Acheulean hand axes reveal planning and artistry. They were crafted from carefully chosen stones. Their symmetry suggests an aesthetic sense, a preference for form as well as function. Many tools were designed for specific purposes: butchering meat, scraping hides, digging for roots, or cutting wood. The Acheulean toolkit endured for over 1 million years, a testament to its effectiveness. And with these tools, Homo erectus transformed from opportunistic scavengers into capable hunters and gatherers. The mastery of fire. Few discoveries in human history rival the significance of fire. For millions of years, lightning and natural wildfires produced flames, but our ancestors could only watch from afar. Then somewhere between 1.7 million and 1 million years ago, Homo erectus began to control fire, one of the most powerful forces in nature. Evidence from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating to around 1 million years ago, shows traces of burned bones and ash, suggesting early hearths. At Zhoukoudian in China, Homo erectus used fire to cook food, ward off predators, and stay warm during cold seasons. Fire changed everything. Nutrition revolution. Cooking softened food, released nutrients, and reduced chewing time, allowing Homo erectus to consume a wider variety of plants and meat. Extended days. Fire provided light, letting communities remain active after sunset and gather safely at night. Protection. Predators feared fire, giving Homo erectus a defensive advantage. Social bonds. Evenings around a hearth may have fostered storytelling, planning, and teaching, the foundations of shared culture. With fire, Homo erectus began to reshape their environment, bending one of nature's most destructive forces to their will. The social revolution, Homo erectus, didn't just evolve physically and technologically, their social structures transformed as well. Evidence suggests they lived in larger, more cooperative groups than earlier species. Survival required collaboration. Hunting large animals demanded teamwork and communication. Protecting camps from predators worked best in numbers. Knowledge, from tool-making to fire maintenance, had to be shared across generations. Archaeologists believe this period marks the emergence of complex social behavior. Fossils show signs of individuals living long after injuries, implying that communities cared for their sick and wounded. This was no longer simple instinct. It reflected empathy and interdependence, qualities that would become central to being human. Facing the ice and fire, but life was never easy. Around 1.2 million years ago, Earth's climate entered a period of dramatic instability. The Pleistocene ice ages began, plunging much of the planet into cycles of glaciation and warming. In Africa, expanding deserts tested Homo erectus's resourcefulness. In northern Asia and Europe, cold winters demanded new survival strategies. Fire became essential for warmth and cooking. Clothing made from animal hides may have begun here, though evidence is scarce. Migration became critical, following herds and shifting habitats to survive. Through these challenges, Homo erectus demonstrated an extraordinary ability to adapt. They were no longer bound to one environment or climate. Wherever they went, they carried their tools, their fire, and their ingenuity, shaping not just their survival, but the world around them. The seeds of culture. The Acheulean hand axe and mastery of fire weren't just technological advances, they were the beginnings of symbolic thought. Some archaeologists argue that the symmetry of hand axes hints at aesthetic awareness, an appreciation for beauty and order. Others suggest that fire-gathering rituals, shared meals, and cooperative hunting laid the foundations of early culture. By passing knowledge down through teaching, Homo erectus created intergenerational continuity, the ability to build upon the achievements of previous generations rather than starting from scratch. This cumulative learning would one day lead to art, language, and civilization. The slow farewell Homo erectus thrived for an astonishing 1.5 million years, making them the longest surviving species of the genus Homo. But by around 300,000 years ago, they began to disappear, replaced by emerging species like Homo heidelbergensis and eventually Homo sapiens. Their disappearance remains a mystery, but their legacy is unmistakable. Every tool we craft, every fire we light, every journey we take across continents, these are echoes of Homo erectus, the pioneers who first dared to step beyond the known. Closing the third chapter as we leave this chapter, picture once more that small group huddled around their fire, shadows dance on their faces. The flames crackle softly, holding back the darkness. Around them the world is vast, wild and dangerous, but within their minds burns a new kind of fire. They are no longer at the mercy of nature. They are learning to shape it, to master it, and to move through it. This is the moment where humanity began to claim the earth. In the next chapter, we'll journey forward into the age of Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals, the thinkers, hunters, and builders who bridged the gap between Homo erectus and us, reshaping tools, culture, and survival strategies in ways that would forever alter our destiny. The wind carries the scent of damp earth and smoke. It is late afternoon, nearly 600,000 years ago, somewhere deep within the grasslands of what is now Europe. A group of hominins walks in silence, their wooden spears resting on their shoulders. The air is heavy, tense with anticipation. They've been following the tracks of a massive prey animal, a prehistoric horse, for hours. Ahead in the fading light, the herd comes into view, drinking at a shallow watering hole. The hunters crouch low, exchanging quick glances. There are no words, but there is understanding. A plan has already been formed. This is the world of Homo heidelbergensis, the skilled hunters, engineers, and innovators who bridged the evolutionary gap between Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and us. Their tools, social structures, and emerging symbolic behaviors set the stage for everything that would come after. The arrival of Homo heidelbergensis, around 700,000 years ago, a new species emerged in Africa from an evolving Homo erectus population. Homo heidelbergensis. With them came some of the most significant advancements yet in the story of humanity. They were taller and stronger than their predecessors, often reaching heights of 5'9" or more, with robust bones and powerful muscles. But their most defining feature lay in their brains. Averaging 1,200 cubic centimeters, almost as large as modern humans, their expanded capacity allowed for planning, strategy, and innovation at unprecedented levels. From these remarkable beings would descend two lineages: Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Homo sapiens, our own species in Africa. But before that split, Homo heidelbergensis left an indelible mark on prehistory. The first true hunters. Unlike earlier hominins, who scavenged or hunted opportunistically, Homo heidelbergensis became active, strategic hunters. At sites like Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists uncovered 400,000-year-old wooden spears, perfectly balanced throwing weapons crafted from spruce and pine. These spears, sharpened to lethal points, reveal sophisticated woodworking skills and an intimate understanding of aerodynamics. This marked a turning point. No longer dependent on ambush or scavenging, they could choose their prey. Coordinated drives allowed them to target large animals like horses, bison, elephants, and even rhinos. Butchering sites show evidence of massive carcass processing, with hundreds of stone flakes scattered around ancient kill zones. Hunting was more than survival. It required teamwork, communication, and trust. The success of a hunt depended on the ability to plan ahead and execute as a group, traits that would later define humanity itself. Advancing the Acheulean legacy, Homo heidelbergensis inherited the Acheulean tool tradition from Homo erectus, but they refined it in ways that reveal a growing sense of foresight and precision. Bifacial hand axes, more symmetrical and expertly crafted than earlier designs, some were shaped with such care that they appear aesthetic as much as functional. Composite tools. Evidence suggests they began combining materials, wooden shafts, with stone spear tips secured by sinew and plant resins. Specialization. Certain tools were optimized for scraping hides, others for cutting meat, and still others for woodworking. This is the first period in which tools show regional diversity. Different groups developed distinct styles based on available materials and local traditions. This hints at something profound: the birth of cultural identity. The taming of fire. Perfected while Homo erectus discovered fire, Homo heidelbergensis perfected its use. Evidence from multiple sites, including Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, 180,000 years ago, shows controlled hearths, deliberate fire pits used repeatedly over time. Here, scientists found clusters of burned seeds, fish bones, and stone tools, suggesting not just cooking, but organized camp life around fire. Fire transformed their existence. Nutrition. Cooked meat and plants provided more calories and reduced exposure to foodborne pathogens. Survival. Fires extended their range into colder regions of Europe and Asia, enabling Homo heidelbergensis to thrive where earlier species could not. Social cohesion. Nightly gatherings around the flames likely became central to community life. Here plans were made, stories exchanged, and knowledge passed down. For the first time, humans were shaping their environment on purpose, not just reacting to it. Living together. Social complexity. Emerges archaeological evidence suggests that Homo heidelbergensis lived in structured groups that may have numbered from 20 to 40 individuals. Unlike earlier species, these communities relied heavily on cooperation to thrive, division of labor, skilled hunters, toolmakers, fire tenders, and child rearers may have had distinct roles within the group. Caring for the vulnerable, fossils show healed injuries, suggesting the wounded and elderly were supported rather than abandoned. Knowledge transfer. Techniques for making spears, hunting large animals, and maintaining fire were almost certainly taught intentionally, a step closer to the foundation of language. Perhaps most intriguingly, burial-like behaviors begin to appear during this period. At Cima de los Huesos, Pit of Bones in Spain, archaeologists discovered the remains of at least 28 individuals dated to around 430,000 years ago. Some scientists argue these were deliberate burials, marking one of the earliest examples of ritualistic behavior. Whether or not these were true graves, they suggest Homo heidelbergensis was beginning to think beyond survival, contemplating concepts of death, memory, and meaning, the first sparks of symbolism. While we often associate symbolic thought with later species like Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, evidence hints that Homo heidelbergensis may have planted the seeds, some Acheulean hand. Axes are too large or delicate to have been purely functional, suggesting they may have served symbolic or social purposes, perhaps signaling skill, status, or identity. If true, this marks a profound milestone, the recognition that objects can represent ideas, a mental leap that underpins art, religion, and culture in modern humans. The climate gauntlet. The world Homo heidelbergensis inhabited was one of unrelenting climate chaos. The Middle Pleistocene transition, between 900,000 and 600,000 years ago, brought increasingly extreme glacial cycles, transforming landscapes into volatile, ever-shifting frontiers. Adapting to these conditions demanded flexibility, mobility. As glaciers advanced, groups migrated south into warmer refuges, only to return when ice retreated. Dietary breadth. They became highly versatile omnivores, exploiting everything from nuts and roots to large game and freshwater fish. Innovation pressure. Unpredictable environments likely drove the development of better tools, coordinated hunting, and long-term planning. It was in this crucible of climate instability that Homo heidelbergensis honed the adaptability their descendants would inherit. The ancestors of two worlds. Perhaps the most fascinating legacy of Homo heidelbergensis is that they stand at a branching point in our family tree. In Europe, isolated populations evolved into Neanderthals 400,000 years ago, adapting to colder climates with stockier builds and advanced survival strategies. In Africa, other populations eventually gave rise to Homo sapiens, 300,000 years ago, who would one day carry the story of humanity forward. In this sense, Homo heidelbergensis is both our ancestor and our cousin's ancestor, a shared origin, point-linking two extraordinary species. Echoes across time. The wooden spears, symmetrical hand axes, and controlled hearths of Homo heidelbergensis whisper of minds growing more curious, creative, and connected. For the first time, humans were shaping landscapes deliberately, hunting with precision, and perhaps even asking questions about their place in the world. They weren't just surviving, they were becoming aware. This awareness set the stage for everything that followed. For the artistry of the Neanderthals, the adaptability of Homo sapiens, and the eventual rise of civilization itself. Closing the fourth chapter, picture the hunters once more crouched in silence, their wooden spears poised. With a sudden burst of energy, they rush forward, driving their prey toward the waiting group. The horse stumbles. The hunt is successful. As the fire crackles that night and the group shares the spoils, Knowledge passes silently from one generation to the next. In their tools, their strategies, and their growing sense of self, we see the distant reflection of ourselves. In the next chapter, we will follow the Neanderthals, masters of ice, stone, and survival, and explore how they developed complex societies, symbolic art, and a resilience that would make them one of the most fascinating branches of the human story. The night is cold and silent. A bitter wind sweeps across the frozen plains of Ice Age Europe, carrying with it fine crystals of snow. Beneath the glow of a pale moon, a group of figures huddles close around a small, carefully built fire. Sparks leap upward, swallowed by the vast darkness above. These are Neanderthals, one of humanity's closest relatives and one of the most misunderstood species in our evolutionary story. Once seen as brutish, slow, and primitive, we now know the opposite is true. Neanderthals were highly intelligent, adaptable, and deeply human in ways that continue to astonish scientists today. Their rise and eventual disappearance shaped the destiny of Homo sapiens and left an enduring mark on our DNA, our behavior, and perhaps even our sense of what it means to be human. The rise of Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, evolved from Homo heidelbergensis around 400,000 years ago. Over hundreds of thousands of years, they spread across vast stretches of Europe, the Middle East, and Western Asia, thriving in some of the harshest environments ever faced by early humans. Their bodies were perfectly adapted to Ice Age extremes. Stocky frames minimized heat loss in freezing conditions. Powerful muscles allowed them to hunt massive animals, from woolly mammoths to bison. Broad noses helped warm frigid air before it reached their lungs. Large brains, averaging 1,500 cubic centimeters, slightly bigger than modern humans, gave them remarkable problem-solving abilities. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals weren't struggling to survive. They were thriving. Masters of stone technology. One of the defining features of Neanderthals was their extraordinary craftsmanship. They developed a sophisticated tool-making tradition called the Mousterian industry, which represented a quantum leap in technological skill. Flake tools. Instead of shaping a single hand axe, Neanderthals struck precise flakes from larger stones to create razor-sharp cutting edges. Specialized implements, tools, were tailored for hunting, hide preparation, woodworking, and plant processing, showing a deep understanding of material use. Composite weapons. Evidence suggests they attached stone points to wooden shafts, creating spears designed for both thrusting and throwing. But Neanderthal ingenuity wasn't limited to stone. At sites like Lazare Cave in France, scientists found evidence of constructed shelters reinforced with animal bones and hides, the beginnings of architecture. Masters of fire and cold in the frozen tundras of Ice Age Europe, fire wasn't just useful. It was survival itself. Neanderthals controlled fire with remarkable precision, organized hearths. Archaeological evidence shows carefully arranged fire pits surrounded by workspaces and sleeping areas. Cooking innovation. Burned bones and plant residues reveal they roasted meat, boiled roots, and may have even fermented food. Climate adaptation. Neanderthals lived through multiple glacial cycles, constantly shifting habitats and developing new strategies to endure. Unlike earlier hominins, Neanderthals transformed the environment around them, shaping caves, shelters, and even landscapes to suit their needs. The human side of Neanderthals. For decades, Neanderthals were depicted as unintelligent cave brutes, but modern discoveries have rewritten their story. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists uncovered several Neanderthal skeletons buried carefully beneath layers of soil. Around one individual lay clusters of pollen grains from medicinal flowers, suggesting deliberate burial with ritual and meaning. This points to something extraordinary. They cared for the sick and injured. Fossils show individuals who survived severe trauma thanks to group support. They buried their dead intentionally, indicating abstract thought and possibly belief systems. They formed emotional bonds within their groups, fostering cooperation and resilience. These findings challenge us to rethink what it means to be human. Perhaps compassion and empathy existed long before Homo sapiens walked the earth. The first artists, one of the most groundbreaking revelations about Neanderthals, came from Spanish caves like La Pasiega, Maltravieso, and Ardales. Dated to at least 65,000 years ago, long before modern humans arrived in Europe, these caves contain red ochre paintings, geometric symbols, and even hand stencils. This means Neanderthals engaged in symbolic behavior, a cornerstone of culture. They weren't just surviving, they were expressing, communicating, and perhaps imagining. Additional evidence includes beadwork and ornaments, shells pierced and painted with pigments suggest body decoration or jewelry. Pigment use, ochre traces on tools and bones, imply they used colors for artistic or ritual purposes. Cave engravings, in places like Gibraltar, carved crosshatch patterns demonstrate deliberate artistic intention. Far from being primitive, Neanderthals may have pioneered symbolic thought, a trait once considered uniquely human. Diet, hunting, and medicine, Neanderthals were apex predators. But their diets were surprisingly diverse. Big game hunters, spears and kill sites show they targeted mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant deer. Plant knowledge, fossilized dental plaque reveals traces of moss, seeds, nuts, and cooked vegetables. Medicinal plants. At El Sidron Cave, remains of chewed willow bark containing salicylic acid, a natural painkiller, suggest an understanding of herbal medicine. This dietary adaptability helped them endure the ever-shifting climates of Ice Age Europe encounters with Homo sapiens around 60,000 years ago. Modern humans began expanding into Neanderthal territories. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted, hunting the same animals, sharing landscapes and, crucially, interbreeding. Genetic studies reveal that almost all non-African modern humans carry 1–2% Neanderthal DNA. These ancient encounters shaped our immunity, skin adaptation, and even cognitive traits. But around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals vanished. Why? Climate change. Sudden shifts devastated ecosystems and food sources. Competition. Modern humans may have been more adaptable, leveraging broader social networks and more efficient technologies. Assimilation. Some Neanderthal populations may have been absorbed through interbreeding rather than wiped out. Their disappearance remains one of prehistory's greatest mysteries, but they didn't vanish entirely. Neanderthals live on in us. The Neanderthal. Legacy. Neanderthals weren't an evolutionary dead end. They contributed to our story in profound ways. Genetic inheritance, traits related to immunity, metabolism, and skin adaptation come directly from Neanderthals. Cultural roots. Our earliest symbolic behaviors, rituals, and artistic expressions may have been inspired or shared with them. Shared humanity. Their compassion, ingenuity, and creativity force us to redefine what makes us human. They weren't less than us. In many ways, they were simply different humans living in a different world. Closing the fifth chapter. Imagine standing at the mouth of a cave in Ice Age Europe, watching as the snow drifts silently under a pale sky. Inside, a Neanderthal child presses their painted hand against the wall, leaving behind a crimson silhouette that will outlast their species by tens of thousands of years. That handprint is a message, not to us specifically, but to the future itself. It says, we were here, we lived, we imagined. In the next chapter, we'll follow the journey of Homo sapiens as they rise from small African bands to the architects of art, language, and innovation, and the eventual masters of an entire planet. The winds of change whispered across the African savannas around 300,000 years ago. Among the scattered grasslands, where ancient rivers carved veins of life through the earth, a new species emerged, one that would eventually transform the destiny of the planet. These were the earliest Homo sapiens, our ancestors. Unlike their predecessors, they carried within them a unique combination of biological evolution and cognitive innovation. Their arrival marked the dawn of a species capable of dreaming, inventing, storytelling, and imagining realities that didn't yet exist. This chapter is the beginning of our story, the African cradle. For decades, scientists searched for the birthplace of modern humans, and the answer now points to Africa. Fossil discoveries from sites like Jebel Irhoud in Morocco and Omo Kibish in Ethiopia reveal early Homo sapiens dating back nearly 300,000 years. These early humans were physically similar. To us, high foreheads and rounded skulls accommodated larger, more complex brains. Slimmer frames and long limbs aided endurance running across open grasslands. Most importantly, their brains had evolved to support abstract thinking, planning, and creativity. This cognitive leap would change everything. The Great Leap Forward. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors survived much like other hominins. Small groups, stone tools, and foraging. But around 100,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Archaeologists call it the cognitive revolution. Symbolic thought emerged. People began to create objects that held meaning, not just utility. Art was born. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, pieces of ochre were carved with intricate crosshatch patterns over 75,000 years ago, possibly the earliest abstract art in history. Ornaments appeared. Shell beads worn as necklaces suggest a sense of identity and social status. Planning and cooperation grew. Hunting strategies became increasingly complex, relying on coordinated efforts and communication. This was the spark that set Homo sapiens apart. Unlike other hominins, we didn't just adapt to the world, we began to reshape it. The power of language. Perhaps the greatest weapon our species ever evolved was language. While Neanderthals and other hominins likely had forms of communication, Homo sapiens developed something far more sophisticated: shared myths. Language allowed us to create stories about spirits, ancestors, animals, and forces of nature. Collective cooperation. Through speech, we coordinated across large groups, building alliances and hunting strategies. Memory. Across generations, knowledge about tools, plants, and migration routes could be passed down, accumulating over centuries. Some scientists believe that once symbolic language evolved, it accelerated cultural innovation exponentially. In just a few thousand years, humans developed more diverse tools, complex rituals, and new survival strategies. Out of Africa, by 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began a great migration out of Africa, a journey that would lead to the colonization of nearly every corner of the planet. First waves. Early groups moved through the Arabian Peninsula and along the coasts of the Indian Ocean, Asia, and Australia. Within a few thousand years, humans reached Southeast Asia and crossed into Australia, adapting to drastically different climates and ecosystems. Europe and the Neanderthal encounter. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens entered Europe, lands already inhabited by Neanderthals. For thousands of years, modern humans and Neanderthals coexisted. They shared landscapes, resources, and even genes. Genetic evidence shows that interbreeding occurred, leaving lasting traces in our DNA. But by 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals disappeared, and Homo sapiens became the dominant human species on Earth. The dawn of art and culture as Homo sapiens spread, something remarkable blossomed: culture. In the deep chambers of Chauvet Cave in France, dating back over 36,000 years, artists painted vivid scenes of horses, lions, and mammoths. The images are astonishingly sophisticated, showing movement, shading, and perspective far ahead of their time. Similar evidence appears across continents. Lascaux Cave, France. Over 600 animals painted with stunning realism. Sulawesi Cave, Indonesia. Hand stencils dating to 40,000 years ago, among the world's oldest known artworks. Venus figurines, Europe. Carvings of female forms symbolize fertility and spirituality. These works weren't just decorations. They reveal shared beliefs, rituals, and symbolic worlds. Art became a bridge, connecting communities, passing traditions, and expressing the inexpressible. The first societies with migration came diversity. As groups settled across Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia, distinct cultures began to emerge. Hunter-gatherer networks. Small bands cooperated to track herds, share resources, and manage territories. Ritual burials. At sites like Kafsa Cave in Israel, burials dating back 100,000 years include shell beads and ochre, hinting at belief. Systems around death and the afterlife. Trade routes. Obsidian, shells, and ochre traveled hundreds of kilometers, suggesting early long-distance exchange. Even at this stage, humans were shaping social hierarchies, spiritual traditions, and technological knowledge. Adapting to a changing world, the late Pleistocene epoch was an era of dramatic climate fluctuations. Glaciers advanced and retreated, reshaping ecosystems. Homo sapiens thrived by adapting faster than any species before them. Flexible diets. From Arctic fish to tropical fruits, humans consumed what was available. Technological innovation. New tools like atlatls, spear throwers, extended hunting. Range and efficiency. Clothing and shelter. Animal hides, woven fibers, and constructed dwellings allowed survival in extreme environments. While other species struggled, our adaptability became our greatest advantage. The beginning of domination by 30,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had reached almost every continent except Antarctica. From Australia's deserts to Europe's icy tundras and the rainforests of South America, humans learned to harness resources, manage fire, and navigate rivers and seas. But this expansion came at a cost: megafaunal extinctions. As humans spread, many large animals, mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, disappeared, likely due to overhunting and habitat changes. Shifting ecosystems. Our ancestors were already beginning to reshape landscapes through controlled burning and resource use. This marked the first signs of human ecological dominance, a force that would only intensify in the millennia to come. The first seeds of civilization. Toward the end of this period, a subtle but profound shift began. Humans started settling for longer periods, especially in areas rich in food and water. In places like the Levant and Anatolia, small groups experimented with early plant cultivation. Wild grains and legumes were selectively harvested and stored. Animal management. Certain herds were followed, protected, and eventually domesticated. Permanent structures. Stone foundations hint at the earliest attempts at stable living spaces. These tiny steps laid the groundwork for the Neolithic Revolution, humanity's transition from nomadic hunting to agriculture, which we'll explore in the next chapter. Closing the 6th chapter. Imagine standing on a cliff overlooking a vast savanna under the starlit African sky. Below you, a small band of Homo sapiens gathers around a fire, sharing stories of ancestors, spirits, and distant Lands. One elder traces patterns into the dirt, symbols representing rivers, hunting grounds, and migration paths. Nearby, a child plays with a shell bead, unaware that their people are about to embark on a journey that will change the face of the earth forever. This is where humanity's unique destiny begins, the merging of imagination, cooperation, and survival. In the next chapter, we'll witness the dawn of agriculture, the rise of permanent settlements, and the first sparks of civilization itself. The world was changing rapidly. Around 12,000 years ago, as the last ice age drew to a close, vast glaciers that once blanketed much of the planet began to melt. Forests reclaimed frozen plains, rivers swelled, and fertile valleys blossomed. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers, following herds, harvesting wild plants, and moving with the seasons. But as the climate stabilized and resources became more predictable, a quiet revolution began. It would transform humanity forever. The Great Transition. Somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, a lush arc stretching from modern-day Iraq through Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan, humans made one of the most profound discoveries in history. They realized they could grow their food. Wild grains like wheat and barley were collected, stored, and eventually planted deliberately. Certain plants, once scattered by nature, were cultivated in organized patches. Over time, people learned to select seeds from the strongest and tastiest crops, accelerating domestication. This was the birth of agriculture, a turning point, so significant that historians call it the Neolithic Revolution. The first domesticated plants, the earliest farmers experimented with a variety of plants depending on their region. Middle East, Fertile Crescent, wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas. East Asia, rice and millet along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. Mesoamerica, maize, corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters of early American farming. South America, potatoes and quinoa in the high Andes. Africa, sorghum, yams, and teff nourished growing populations. Through careful selection, wild plants transformed into high-yield crops, giving humans unprecedented control over their survival. The domestication of animals, alongside crops, humans began taming the animal kingdom. Early partnerships with animals forever changed human societies. Dogs were domesticated first, possibly over 15,000 years ago, aiding in hunting and protection. Sheep and goats were managed for meat, milk, and hides. Cattle provided strength for plowing and a steady source of food. Pigs adapted quickly to human settlements, thriving on food scraps. Later, horses revolutionized transportation, warfare, and trade. This integration of plants and animals laid the foundation for permanent settlements, a radical shift from the nomadic life of our ancestors. The birth of villages. As food production increased, so did population density. Humans no longer needed to wander endlessly in search of sustenance. Villages began to rise. Jericho in modern-day Palestine, dating back nearly 11,000 years, is considered one of the world's first permanent settlements. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of stone houses, granaries, and even defensive walls. In Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, homes were built side by side, connected by rooftops. Murals on the walls depict mythical creatures, hunting, scenes and spiritual symbols suggesting early forms of religion and art. These early communities were self-sustaining ecosystems. Families stored grain, raised animals, built homes, and shared responsibilities. The surplus that changed everything. Agriculture introduced a concept humanity had never experienced before: surplus. When there was more food than immediate needs, people could store resources for the future. Surpluses had profound effects. Population growth, more reliable food meant healthier children and larger families. Division of labor. Not everyone needed to farm. Some became toolmakers, builders, or spiritual leaders. Trade networks, communities, exchanged grain, obsidian, shells and animal products over hundreds of kilometers. The accumulation of surplus set humanity on a path toward complex economies, social hierarchies, and eventually cities. The rise of social structures. In small nomadic bands, everyone contributed equally to survival. But as settlements grew, social roles began to change. Some families controlled larger plots of land or more livestock, creating wealth disparities. Religious leaders and shamans gained spiritual authority. Skilled artisans and toolmakers became highly valued members of society. This was the dawn of social stratification, a precursor to kingdoms, empires, and organized governance. Spirituality and the sacred farming tied humans to the land in ways they had never experienced before. The cycles of the seasons, the flooding of rivers, and the growth of crops became sacred rhythms. Fertility rituals emerged, honoring gods and goddesses who controlled the harvest. Burial practices became more elaborate, suggesting belief in an afterlife. Massive stone structures like Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, built over 11,000 years ago, suggest organized religion predated agriculture but flourished alongside it. These spiritual frameworks helped unify growing populations, fostering cooperation and shared identity. Technology takes off agriculture, spurred a wave of technological innovation. Plows and sickles improved farming efficiency. Pottery allowed the storage of grains, water, and oil, critical for survival during lean seasons. Weaving techniques advanced, enabling clothing production from flax, wool, and cotton. Stone tools became sharper, more specialized, and more durable. Each innovation allowed humans to produce more with less effort, accelerating cultural and societal development. The first conflicts with permanent settlements came territorial disputes. Land once abundant became a resource to defend. Evidence from ancient skeletons shows violent injuries, arrows lodged in bones, skull fractures, and signs of organized attacks. The walls of Jericho may represent one of humanity's earliest attempts at fortification against rival groups. For the first time, warfare became a recurring part of human existence. Environmental impact agriculture also marked the beginning of humanity's profound influence on the environment. Forests were cleared to make way for fields. Rivers were redirected through primitive irrigation systems. Soil was overworked, leading to early erosion and fertility loss. This was the start of a delicate relationship between humans and nature, one that would shape the fate of civilizations for millennia. The spread of agriculture, what began in the Fertile Crescent, soon rippled across the globe. China, rice cultivation along the Yangtze River supported rapidly growing populations. India, the Indus Valley thrived on wheat, barley, and domesticated cattle. Europe, farming arrived via migration, and trade, blending with local hunter-gatherer traditions. Americas, independent agricultural revolutions arose, with maize, beans, and potatoes sustaining entire societies. In each region, the shift from hunting to farming reshaped cultures, economies, and landscapes. A world on the edge of civilization. 8,000 years ago, humanity had crossed an irreversible threshold. Permanent villages dotted river valleys and coastlines. Tools and technologies spread across continents. Social, spiritual, and economic complexity deepened. We were no longer simply surviving. We were designing our environments, organizing ourselves into communities, and laying the groundwork for something even greater: cities, states, and empires. Closing the 7th chapter, imagine standing on a hilltop overlooking the Fertile Crescent. At sunset, Below, a village hums with life. Farmers tend fields of ripening barley. Children chase goats between rows of mud brick houses. A potter shapes clay vessels as smoke curls from a communal fire. In the distance, a shaman chants before a towering stone monument, offering prayers to unseen gods for rain and abundance. These people don't know it yet, but they are building the foundation of civilization itself. In the next chapter, we'll witness the emergence of the first true cities, the invention of writing, and the rise of the earliest kingdoms and organized states, a turning point that would change the course of human history forever. The quiet villages of the Neolithic period were only the beginning. As populations grew and surpluses expanded, humanity stood on the threshold of a new age, the rise of the first true cities. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It was the result of thousands of years of innovation, cooperation, and conflict. By around 5,000 years ago, scattered farming communities had evolved into bustling urban centers, places where thousands of people lived, worked, and dreamed. Together, with these new cities came laws, organized religion, monumental architecture, trade networks, and the very first written words. Humanity had crossed into history. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, lies a land known as Mesopotamia, meaning between rivers. Today it is mostly within modern-day Iraq, but around 3500 BCE, it was home to one of the earliest and most advanced civilizations on Earth, the Sumerians. Here, life depended on the annual floods that enriched the soil. Sumerians built irrigation canals, dug reservoirs, and mastered water management, turning the region into a breadbasket capable of supporting large populations. Uruk, one of Sumer's greatest cities, may have housed over 40,000 people, an astonishing number for its time. Towering above the city were massive ziggurats, stepped temple structures where priests performed rituals to honor the gods. Skilled artisans crafted pottery, jewelry, and bronze tools, fueling a thriving trade network stretching from India to the Mediterranean. This was not just survival, this was civilization. The birth of writing. As cities expanded, life became increasingly complex. Farmers delivered grain to centralized storehouses, merchants traded across distant lands, and rulers collected taxes to maintain armies and temples. To manage this growing web of relationships, the Sumerians invented something extraordinary: writing. Around 3200 BCE, they developed cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets using a reed stylus. At first, writing served a practical purpose, recording inventories, debts, and transactions. Over time, it evolved into a tool for storytelling, law, and literature. From these tablets emerged some of humanity's earliest known texts, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, a timeless tale of kings, gods, and the search for immortality. The Code of Hammurabi. With cities came conflict, and with conflict came the need for order. Around 1750 BCE, King Hammurabi of Babylon created one of history's first written legal systems, the Code of Hammurabi. Inscribed on towering stone steles, the code laid out 282 laws, covering everything from trade agreements to family disputes. An eye for an eye, perhaps the most famous phrase associated with Hammurabi's code, captured the principle of proportional justice. These laws weren't just rules, they were a social contract, binding diverse peoples under a shared sense of order. For the first time, justice was not left entirely to rulers or priests, it was codified and made public. Egypt. The gift of the Nile. While Mesopotamia thrived, another great civilization blossomed along the Nile River in Egypt. Each year, the Nile flooded predictably, depositing rich silt on its banks. This natural rhythm allowed the Egyptians to create a stable agricultural system, sustaining a kingdom that would last for thousands of years. The Egyptians believed their rulers, the pharaohs, were divine beings chosen by the gods. Under their command, laborers built some of history's most awe-inspiring monuments, the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Sphinx, and sprawling temple complexes like Karnak and Luxor. Hieroglyphics, a pictorial writing system, covered tomb walls and papyrus scrolls, recording everything from religious texts to administrative documents. Death, for the Egyptians, was not an end, but a transition. Elaborate burial practices, including mummification, reflected their belief in the eternal afterlife. The Indus Valley Civilization, far to the east, another sophisticated society flourished along the Indus River around 2500 BCE. Today, its ruins lie in modern Pakistan and northwest India, in cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley cities were remarkably organized. Grid-like streets, advanced drainage systems, and public baths suggest an unparalleled focus on urban planning. Archaeologists have discovered standardized weights and measures, evidence of a highly regulated trade economy. Intriguingly, the Indus script, carved on seals and pottery, remains undeciphered, leaving much of their culture shrouded in mystery. This was a civilization of engineers and merchants connected to distant lands by extensive trade routes. Stretching to Mesopotamia and beyond, China's early dynasties, while the West developed cities and writing, early Chinese civilizations were rising along the Yellow River. By around 2000 BCE, the Xia dynasty, considered China's first, laid the groundwork for millennia of imperial rule. They were succeeded by the Shang dynasty, which brought advances in bronze metallurgy for tools and weapons, oracle bones, inscribed with the earliest known Chinese characters used for divination, a complex social hierarchy, with kings, priests, warriors, and farmers forming distinct societal layers. The reverence for ancestors and the belief in heavenly mandates would remain cornerstones of Chinese culture for thousands of years. The power of trade as civilizations flourished. They reached out beyond their borders, connecting through vast trade networks. Mesopotamians traded textiles and grain for timber, copper, and precious stones. Egyptians exchanged gold, papyrus, and glass for incense and exotic woods. The Indus Valley exported beads, pottery, and cotton to distant regions. These exchanges weren't just economic. They carried ideas, technologies, and cultural practices across continents, shaping the development of future societies. Religion and cosmic order. In these early civilizations, religion was deeply intertwined with politics and daily life. In Mesopotamia, dozens of gods ruled over natural forces, and priests mediated between humanity and the divine. Egyptian pharaohs were seen as living gods, tasked with maintaining Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance and justice. In the Indus Valley, fertility symbols and water rituals hint at early spiritual practices tied to nature. In China, the mandate of heaven justified a ruler's power as long as they governed wisely and fairly. Religion provided legitimacy, unity, and moral codes, shaping laws, traditions, and even urban design. Innovation and knowledge. This period was an explosion of human creativity. Bronze Age tools and weapons revolutionized agriculture and warfare. Mathematics and astronomy advanced as civilizations tracked the stars, seasons, and time. Calendars emerged, vital for planning harvests and religious festivals. Techniques for shipbuilding and navigation expanded trade horizons even further. These breakthroughs didn't just sustain societies, they propelled them forward, laying the groundwork for future empires, the seeds of empire. By the end of this era, humanity stood on the brink of yet another transformation. Small city-states were giving way to larger territorial kingdoms. Armies grew more powerful, rulers became more ambitious, and trade enriched elites who sought to expand their influence. The stage was set for the first great empires, vast political entities capable of uniting diverse peoples under a single rule. Closing the 8th chapter picture, the ancient city of Uruk as night falls. Oil lamps glow from clay windows. Priests ascend the steps of a ziggurat, whispering prayers to the gods. Merchants haggle in the marketplace, their goods from lands hundreds of miles away. A scribe etches the day's grain records into a wet clay tablet, unaware that he is helping preserve humanity's first written history. In Egypt, the pyramids rise against the desert sky. Along the Indus, silent streets are lined with red brick homes. In China, a king consults oracle bones by firelight, seeking the will of heaven. Across the world, humanity has taken a monumental leap from scattered tribes to organized civilizations. In the next chapter, we will witness the rise of the first empires, the clash of armies and ideologies, and the emergence of powerful leaders whose names echo through time. By the time humanity stepped into the late Bronze Age, our species had transformed the world. Hunter-gatherers had become farmers, farmers had become city builders, and city builders had become empire creators. But this era, stretching roughly from 2300 BCE to 1200 BCE, was not just about the rise of civilizations. It was also about their fragility. This chapter closes the story of the first empires, their glorious heights, their devastating falls, and how their struggles reshaped humanity forever. The Akkadian dream in the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia. The visionary ruler Sargon of Akkad changed history forever. Before him, Sumerian city-states like Uruk, Lagash, and Ur constantly fought for dominance. Sargon forged something greater, the Akkadian Empire, humanity's first true empire. For the first time, diverse peoples were united under a central administration. Trade networks stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. A shared language and adapted cuneiform script helped create a unified identity. But Sargon's dream was fragile. Droughts, rebellions, and invasions by the Gutians, tribes, from the eastern mountains eventually brought the empire to its knees. Egypt ascends to glory. While Mesopotamia struggled, Egypt entered its new kingdom, a golden age of power and prosperity. The mighty pharaohs ruled as both kings and gods, expanding their influence across Africa and the Levant. Hatshepsut redefined leadership, sending fleets to distant Punt and overseeing massive building projects. Thutmose III led 17 successful military campaigns, creating Egypt's largest empire in history. Akhenaten broke tradition, attempting to replace Egypt's polytheistic religion with the worship of a single god, Aten, a bold experiment that ended with his death. Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, became a living legend, immortalized by colossal monuments and his famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites. Egypt's monumental architecture, temples, tombs, and obelisks, symbolized a belief in eternity, yet even the eternal kingdom could not escape the upheavals to come. The Hittites, warriors of Anatolia. In the rugged mountains of Anatolia, the Hittites built a mighty empire based on iron mastery and chariot warfare. With their capital at Hattusa, they were rivals to both Egypt and Mesopotamia. Their innovations were groundbreaking. Ironworking allowed them to forge stronger tools and weapons, centuries before most neighbors adopted the technology. A codified legal system brought stability across their vast territories. Diplomacy thrived. The Hittite-Egyptian peace treaty, signed after the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, remains one of the earliest recorded treaties in history. Yet the Hittites, too, would face an enemy they could not defeat: Minoans, Mycenaeans, and the dawn of European civilization. While empires rose in the east, The islands and coasts of the Aegean Sea nurtured Europe's earliest civilizations. The Minoans of Crete, flourishing between 2000 to 1450 BCE, built labyrinthine palaces like Knossos, adorned with vivid frescoes and advanced plumbing. The Mycenaeans of mainland Greece adopted much from the Minoans, but developed their own militaristic culture. Their fortified citadels, Linear B script, and myths of warrior kings became the foundation of Greek epic literature. Legends like the Trojan War, immortalized in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, are rooted in this era, blending history with mythology, laying seeds for Western storytelling traditions. The Coming Storm, the Sea Peoples in the late 13th century BCE, a shadow swept across the Mediterranean. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions speak of mysterious sea peoples, fierce invaders who attacked by both land and sea, leaving destruction in their wake. Their assaults were devastating. The Hittite Empire fell, its capital burned to the ground. The Mycenaean palaces were abandoned, their culture disappearing into obscurity. Even Egypt, though it survived, was severely weakened after Ramesses III fought them in a climactic naval battle recorded on the walls of Medinet Habu. Who were the Sea Peoples? Scholars still debate their origins. Perhaps they were refugees from climate disasters, or warriors displaced by famine, or even a coalition of collapsing states seeking survival. The Bronze Age collapse. By 1200 BCE, between 1200 and 1150 BCE, a perfect storm struck the ancient world. Climate shifts caused widespread droughts and crop failures. Mass migrations created pressure on stable societies. The reliance on bronze became a weakness when access to tin, essential for bronze making, was disrupted. The rise of iron weaponry destabilized traditional military hierarchies. Waves of warfare and internal revolts toppled governments. Trade routes vanished. Writing systems disappeared in places like Greece, plunging regions into so-called Dark Ages, where knowledge and cultural development regressed for centuries. Seeds of a new age. Though the Bronze Age ended in chaos, it wasn't the end of civilization. From its ashes, new powers and innovations emerged. Egypt survived, but its imperial ambitions faded. The Assyrians harnessed iron weaponry to create one of history's most ruthless and effective war machines. The Phoenicians rose as maritime traders, spreading the alphabet that would shape countless future languages. In distant Greece, forgotten Mycenaean traditions slowly evolved into what would later become classical Greek culture. The Iron Age had begun, a time of faster progress, greater connectivity, and deadlier wars.